I think the average American may not realize that Islam is making massive, and I mean massive inroads in the UK. Where are we at right now? Because I see the UK as really the front line for the fight in the struggle for Western civilization because of the Islamic advances there.
London's gone, Paris is gone, Berlin's gone. The visuals you think of, they're gone. 33% of London is English. And the warning I bring to America is I'm not going to talk to you about what I've read in a book. I'm going to talk to you about what I saw.
You're living it.
When I was born in 1982, we had one mosque in my hometown. We now have 45. I've seen the decay. I've seen the attack on freedom, but I've also seen the unholy alliance of the left, along with the police, along with the media, along with the Islamists, how they all unite together. And I've witnessed that. The way I'd say unite together, the left surrender to them, the government surrender to them, politicians surrender to them. So they rule with fear. And fear has paralyzed an entire nation, a nation of lions. And the warning I bring to America is this isn't far away now, it's here. I've come and landed in Texas. I've gone to Plano. I've interviewed, I don't know if you've seen the interview I've done.
I have.
So I've sat and met journalists. I've sat and met politicians. I thought it was important to meet everyday American people. And I sat with a couple who have now fled Plano because, and she cries her eyes out. Her grandmother lived there. Her mother lived there. She's been forced to leave after harassment by the imported Islamic community. I went to one of these huge compounds. Let's not call it a mosque because it's not. It's an entire community.
It is.
The roads are called Medina Villas. And I've seen this. This is the seed has been planted. You need to understand what has happened to your country over the last 8 years since Joe Biden's opened your borders.
Yeah.
You were used to Hispanic, Mexican immigration. Well, not anymore. Pakistani, Afghani, Somali. They have been brought in. It's planned. Ask yourself this as an American audience. Why have Somalians come from the hottest place in the world and found themselves in Minnesota, the coldest place in America? They haven't chose to go there. They've been put there. Your borders have been opened. Your country's been flooded. 700%. Legal immigration went up 700% in your swing states. They don't want there to ever be a swing state. They were changing the demographic of the vote bank. Now, I've seen how this operates, and I've seen the power of it.
In a wide-ranging conversation with journalist and Middle East analyst Eric Stakelbeck, British activist Tommy Robinson issued a stark warning to American audiences. The social and political conflicts, he says, are reshaping the United Kingdom, could, in his view, soon emerge in the United States. Robinson has long been one of Britain's most polarizing political figures. To supporters, he's a whistleblower sounding the alarm about immigration, cultural change, and radical Islamist networks. To critics, he is a far-right provocateur whose rhetoric fuels division and anti-Muslim sentiment. During the interview, Robinson argued that large-scale immigration, particularly from Muslim-majority countries, has transformed parts of Britain in ways many citizens were unprepared for. He described what he believes is a growing alliance between Islamist activists and left-wing political groups, an alignment he claims has suppressed criticism of immigration policy and discouraged open debate. Robinson's warning to Americans was blunt. The dynamics, he says, have reshaped Britain could eventually appear across the Atlantic if similar policies take hold. He pointed specifically to immigration trends and cultural tensions as potential flashpoints, arguing that even traditionally conservative areas in the United States could face similar challenges. Robinson framed the issue as part of a broader struggle over the future of Western identity and values, what he described as the preservation of Judeo-Christian civilization. According to him, Western societies are at a crossroads, facing pressures from both ideological movements and demographic change. Robinson himself remains a controversial figure in Britain. Over the years, he has faced legal battles, arrests related to public order offenses, and bans from several social media platforms. Yet he continues to maintain a following among activists who believe mainstream institutions have ignored or suppressed debates over immigration and cultural integration. Whether Robinson's warnings resonate widely in America remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that the questions he raises about immigration policy, integration, and political speech continue to fuel intense debate on both sides of the Atlantic.
What would have happened? Let's use our imaginations. I'm a big fan of imaginations when it comes to politics. It's very important. If Starmer had said, right, I'm not going to make Mandelson ambassador, I'm giving that job to Nigel Farage, what would have happened then?
Well, this is of course assuming that Nigel Farage would have taken the job. It's entirely possible that he would have turned it down, which of course would have been pretty damaging to Keir Starmer, pretty embarrassing, might have caused Reform a little bit of a dip short term, I suppose, because people would have been saying, oh, well, he's not playing ball. But it would have been the most sensible thing to do. The question would have been, would Nigel Farage have been in a position to say no? Would he, in fact, have thought to himself, actually, this is quite a good gig and it will get me a lot of attention, at least on the international stage? I think Claire's right, though, that it long term would have potentially damaged Reform and Farage a little bit more. But, that's not because anybody could say with any certainty that what is happening in the Gulf would definitively happen in the way that it is. It's simply because Donald Trump is just not very popular with the British people and never will be. The funny thing is, actually, I think there is a little bit of steel and a little bit of strategy there. I just don't think it's very well placed. I think his view and his vision for Britain, if you like, is of a certain variety that requires somebody to be pretty blind, to be pretty obstinate, and to ignore the noise. I think we have to sort of take a step back and look at all the other things that are happening right now when it comes to things like the potential abolition of jury trials, or the rushing through of the assisted dying bill, or the removal of hereditary peers, or the surrendering of the Chagos Islands. All of these things actually add up, they line up to somebody who has a very different, highly aggressively left-wing view of what the UK should be, and he has continued to prosecute these things despite public opinion saying, actually, we're heavily opposed to this.
Yeah.
This is somebody who is determined to get his way, even if that's to the detriment of his own party.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on a really interesting point there, Benedict, which is, to what extent is Keir Starmer putting his finger in the air and blowing in the wind? To what extent is this a deep-rooted, very strong ideology that he lives by and that his politics are very much underpinned by? And I think the problem is, because he's not honest about how strong his beliefs are, it often appears that he's just going with the mood of the day, but underneath it all is quite a nefarious agenda.
It is a nefarious agenda. I think that's exactly the word. And you're right. It's the fact that he isn't honest with people that does make it look like he's pivoting. But he's not honest with people because he knows full well it would be a deeply unpopular platform to run on. That's why none of the stuff that I just mentioned, for instance, was in Labour's manifesto. They wouldn't dare say to the electorate, oh, this is what we're planning to do. But what it is that makes him pivot is when his ideology runs up against reality. And that's the thing, is that every ideologue always gets into this position. They try to smash their way through, and you can't always smash your way through in these circumstances. He's in a difficult position. His party doesn't particularly like him, but they aren't strong enough to get rid of him. He keeps on hitting the buffers, which means that he has to slightly reverse and slightly alter. And, as your panelists say, that gives the impression, I think, of weakness. But underneath all of that, I think there is a steely determination. This is a man who knows he's got 3 years to enact real change, which many of your viewers will think is deeply damaging, and I happen to agree, but that's what he wants, and that's what he's going to focus on come hell or high water.
Let's bring